All right, Rabosai, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Let us begin by thanking our shir sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Yoel Sara Kelman, in honor of the birth of their daughter Oriya Tahel, and in the hope that all the couples praying for children will soon have their tefilos answered. Amen. Teri Czinn for dedicating all the shir midrashos this month in honor of their grandchildren, Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali, Moshe. Our Day of Learning sponsors, Milton Melanie Gertner, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of their mother, Fannie Gertner, from Yitzchak Michel, and in gratitude to Hashem and everyone's prayers for the homecoming of her namesake and great-granddaughter, Esther Fruma, from her extended stay in the NICU. And Hashem, and Hashem should have an aliyah, and this little Bas Yisrael should grow in to become a great Bas Yisrael. Admer ve'esem shanim tovos. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Wiseman, for dedicating the shir in memory of his father, Morris Wiseman, Moshe ben Laben Zichron Libracha. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, then Hashem will have an aliyah and the family in Nechama. Shkoyach, everyone. I also want to begin by just extending my hakaras hatov to Reb Kalman Akiva and to Rabbi Richter for giving the shir while I was away. It's always it's a good feeling to know that the shir is something that's very special to me. Dafsan is very special to me. So it's good to know that Baruch Hashem, that when I'm gone, it's left in good hands, able hands, capable hands, caring hands, loving hands. So yashikoach to our Magidei shir for keeping the fire burning even while I was gone. You know, Rabbi Nachman says, just by way of Hakdama, Rabbi Nachman says that we know that one of the greatest averus that Klal Yisrael committed was the chet meraglim, was the sin of the spies. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu had given them such a great gift of Eretz Yisrael. And we waited so many generations, already from Adam Avinu until we got with Moshe Rabbeinu, right by the Transjordanian lands. And the meraglim go in, and what's supposed to be just a simple, okay, a reconnaissance mission. Go in, look around, peek around, poke around, come back, say it's great, Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to take us in. And it turned into such a disaster. And turned into such an incredible disaster. And all because they failed to see the beauty in the greatest gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has ever given Klal Yisrael. Next to Torah. Torah is the greatest gift. Right after Torah comes Eretz Yisrael. And Rabbi Nachman says that each and every Jew has an obligation to be metakin the chet meraglim, to go ahead and atone for the chet meraglim. And he says there are two ways that you do that. Number one is to never ever chas v'shalom say anything negative about the land, which is incredibly important, right? I always tell my children this. You don't like the falafel? You could say the falafel doesn't agree with me. You can't say it's not good. I mean, in Baltimore, you could say it's not good if you want to, but in Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to say anything negative about the land. There's too much traffic. You could say, I wish I could get to my destination a little bit faster, right? But you can't say, there's terrible traffic everywhere in this place. You have to be careful about how you speak about Eretz Yisrael. And the second part, says the Rebbe, is to make sure to not just refrain or abstain from speaking negatively, but to speak positively as well. So I feel mechuyev because I feel that we were so privileged to be able to get to Eretz Yisrael. So privileged. Because literally again, 2 days, 3 days after we arrived, they shut down the country again. And it felt so privileged to be able to be there. Not the time now to speak about what Hanukkah there was like, because it was something, just something from a different world. But I feel an achrayus to make sure to reinforce Tova ha'aretz ma'od, that the land that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us is so magnificent and is so wonderful and is so incredible, both beruchnius ubegashmius. Everything about the land is absolutely amazing. And everything about it is absolutely uplifting. And every aspect of it is absolutely inspiring. From the places to the people. Ashreinu matol chalkenu umanaim goralenu umayafa yerushasenu. We have a beautiful Torah. We have a beautiful land. And zachinu. We are truly privileged that it's ours. Okay, so now that I was mekayim, the obligation to speak positively about Eretz Yisrael and hopefully doing my part in Eretz Hashem, some way, some small way, being metakin the chet meraglim, let us begin. So also we have the great privilege today to begin this the fourth parak of Maseches Taanis. An incredible, again, this Masechta has just been It's been a privilege to be able to learn each and every daf of this beautiful Masechta. So we'll say, let's go. B'shlosha prakim b'shana kohanim nosin es kapeiim. There are three times throughout the year that the kohanim go ahead and duchin arba pa'amim bayom. Now, the truth is, the Gemara is going to reinterpret this phrase, but for now, here's how we're going to read it. There are 3 times throughout the year that the Kohanim daven 4 times during the day. How can you duchen 4 times during the day? B'shachris, b'musaf, b'mincha, or b'ni'ilas sha'arim. By shachris, musaf, mincha, and ni'ilas sha'arim. And I will say, what's ni'ilas sha'arim? So Rashi here says something amazing. Rashi says, Mefarish bebrachos Yerushalmi p'tar tefilas hashachar, a masai ni'ilah. So the Gemara asks, when is the tefillah of ni'ilah? Yesh omrim ni'ilas sharei mikdash, v'yesh omrim ni'ilas sharei shamayim shenoal and osan la'es erev. Big Gemara tefillah. So we'll say, so first of all, Rashi just says, by the way, ni'ilah means closing. Rashi says, there's a machlokes, closing of what? Closing of what? Is it the closing of the gates of Shamayim, the celestial gates? Or is it the closing of the gates of the Beis HaMikdash? Which one is it? So we'll say, by the way, I just want to point out, it's not our topic for now, but that's not like an academic machlokes. That has dramatic ramifications as to what exactly the nature of the tefillah of Ne'ilah itself is. In any event, the name of the tefillah is gleaned by the fact that something is closing, something is coming to an end. Celestial gates, Beis HaMikdash gates, and Rashi says, V'noagin hayu le'espalo tefillas Ne'ilah b'chol ta'anisam k'derech shemispalo b'yom kippurim. Shabbos said, we most often associate Ne'ilah with Yom Kippur, understandably so. But in fact, there was a Ne'ilah tefillah, I'm not going to say by every fast day, but by many of the fast days. So therefore, I will say, what the Mishnah says is as follows. There are 3 times throughout the year, we'll discuss which 3 times throughout the year, that you duchen 4 times a day. So how would you duchen 4 times a day? Duchening shachris, mincha, musaf, ni'ilah. Okay, so now that I know the 4 times a day, what are the 3 times during the year in which we duchen 4 times during the day? B'tanios, b'ma'amados, or b'yom kippurim. So we'll say by tanios, fast days. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. We'll skip for just a moment. Yom Kippur, pretty self-explanatory as well. And ma'amados. So I will say, we've made mention of the ma'amados, but here again, Rashi is, the Mishnah is going to go ahead and explain what these ma'amados were. Now, for our purposes, we're going to translate ma'amados as groupings or gatherings. Let's just take a quick look at Rashi. Rashi says, actually, not yet. So the Gemara says, what are ma'amados? Elon ma'amados. So we'll say, this is absolutely fascinating. Elon ma'amados. L'fi shenemar tzaves b'nei Yisrael es karbani lachmi. So we'll say, the pasuk says that there's a karban hatamid. The karban hatamid is the daily offering. Remember again, there's tamid shal shachar, tamid shal bein ha'arbayim, the daily morning offering, the daily afternoon offering. Now we'll say, now remember, the halacha is that when you bring a karban, the owner is supposed to be present at the offering of the karban. That's the ideal. So technically speaking, karban tamid is a karban sibor. It is a karban that is brought on behalf of Klal Yisrael, which technically speaking should require what? What should it require? All of Klal Yisrael to be present. So the Gemara says, "V'chi heich karbano shal adam karev v'hu eino omed al gabav." But one second. So the karban tamid is for each of us. It's a karban sibor. It's for each of us, which means that technically speaking, each of us are supposed to be present when the karban is offered. How can you offer a karban without the owner being present? I will say, quick look at Rashi. We're going to jump back and forth a couple of times. Lefi shnemar tzavis b'nei Yisrael she'atamid ba min hashkalim shel kol Yisrael. Also remember again, where does the karban tamid come from? It comes from the machzis hashekel. The half shekel that we contribute goes to a number of things, but one of the major things it goes to is to finance the offering of the tamid shel shachar, tamid shel bein arbayim, because again, it's offered on behalf of each of us. The Rashi says, "V'afshar shiv kol Yisrael omdin al gabi karbanam uminu ma'amados dios mekoma." So we'll say, so now listen to this. So here we have an interesting halachic issue. What's the halachic issue? Technically speaking, when you offer up a karban, what's supposed to happen? Owner is supposed to be present. Who owns karban tamid? Klal Yisrael. Could Klal Yisrael be present by the offering of the karban tamid? No. So how do we solve this issue? So the Gemara says, Hiskinu Nevi'im Harishonim. This is so fascinating. So the early Nevi'im instituted as follows. Now, we'll say, who are the early Nevi'im? Rashi says, Shmuel and David. Shmuel Hanavi, David HaMelech. Now, what's unique about this institution? Shmuel and David lived before the Beis HaMikdash. Remember again, this is not strange, because remember, David HaMelech did anything and everything he could in the absence of building the Beis HaMikdash, right? He wrote Sefer Tehillim, which is the book of Levitic song to be sung in the Beis HaMikdash. He purchased the threshing floor of Aravna HaYevusi, right, which would become ultimately the site of the Beis HaMikdash. I'll tell you, it's incredible. One of the things I got to do, thanks to Sirab Jerry, is on the shir. So Jerry arranged for us to be able to get into some of the new excavations by the tunnels, and it's absolutely amazing what it is that they're finding. We don't have time for it today. I'll make time for it today. But one of the things that they just recently found was potentially where the Sanhedrin sat. I'll tell you very quickly. One of the things they found was this massive semicircle slab of stone right outside of the walls, outside of the kotel. So remember again, the kotel is the retaining wall. So right outside of the wall. So they're trying to figure out, why is there a massive semicircle right outside of the kotel? As we'll say, so okay, I'll wet your appetite a little bit more. Right outside, right across from it, they see these three large rectangular cutouts in the stone that they're positing were storefronts. I'm listening to the guy tell us this. I make eye contact with Reb Jerry. I never like to interrupt guides on tours because, they're professionals. They know what they're doing. But this one I couldn't abstain. I said, is it possible? The Gemara says, Misharabu haratzchonim. You had this in Daf. We just had this a little while ago. Misharabu haratzchonim. When unfortunately, again, there were too many capital cases happening, the Sanhedrin exiled itself from the Lishkas Hagazis. They exiled themselves from the chamber of hewn stone. And remember, where does the Gemara say? Where did they relocate? They relocated by the storefronts. Shabbos, because they were positing that this semicircle slab of stone could fit 71 people. Well, why else do you need a semicircle to fit 71 people? It's quite possible that they just unearthed the area where the Sanhedrin sat when they exiled themselves from the Lishkas Hagazis, because they no longer wanted to adjudicate capital cases, and they set up shop right outside of the kotel, right outside of the retaining wall, so they could still operate, but not adjudicate cases. Incredible. No idea why I mentioned this. Right? But in any event. So David HaMelech, right? David HaMelech did everything. There's no real tie-in. It's just incredible. You're literally looking at, and you should see the stone is magnificent. I don't know how it's so preserved. It's white. It's literally, I'm sure they polish whatever. It's white, and it's sitting right opposite these stores. Incredible. David HaMelech did not have the opportunity to build the Beis HaMikdash, so he did anything and everything that he could in the absence of building the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, so the Mishnah goes on. The Mishnah says, so what did David and Shmuel do? Listen to this. They made 24 mishmaros. Now, both say. Now, remember again, that's not that. Remember, we've learned about this before. When up until this point, and whenever we spoke about mishmaros, who are mishmaros referring to? Who are they referring to? Kohanim. Right? We know this already. There were 24 watches, we'll call it, of Kohanim. Now remember again, those 24 watches, just for a second, the Mishnah doesn't mention this, but I'll just mention this now. Those 24 watches were made up of what? Remember? Multiple, what we call Bate Avos. Bate Avos are families. Each mishmar would serve in the Beis HaMikdash for how long? 1 week at a time. Over the course of that week, remember again, families would draw lots as to who would go ahead and do which one. So we had this just recently when we spoke about, again, drinking wine. And actually, we're going to see it this paragraph. Drinking wine when you're on call. Okay, we'll get to it. In any event, she had 24 mishmaros of Kohanim. Each mishmar was made up of multiple Bate Avos, multiple families. And each mishmar got 1 week in the Mikdash. Well, now, the Mishnah tells us, by the way, it wasn't just Kohanim who were divided up into 24 mishmaros. Rather, again, listen to this. Al kol mishmar u'mishmar haya ma'amad b'Yerushalayim shel Kohanim, shel Leviyim, v'shel Yisraelim. And I will say, again, for every mishmar, this is incredible. The mishmaros weren't just Kohanim. Every single mishmar was made up of Kohanim, Leviyim, and Yisraelim. So Rabbi said, now watch this. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment, because Rashi, we're going to see, we're not going to get into this right now, but there is a huge machlokes rishonim as to how to read this Mishnah. Just because it's Daf Yomi, we have to get through a blot of Gemara, we are just going to go with the Perish of Rashi. So look at Rashi, al kol mishmar, arba ve'esrim, mishmaro shal kohanim hayu shmu davet tiknum, ve'al kol mishmar hayu ma'amad b'Yerushalayim, shekavuin va'omdin bi'ir, va'omdin al karban achehem. So Rabbi said, listen to this. So therefore, for every mishmar, the mishmar was stationed in Yerushalayim. So again, you were part of Mishmar A, Mishmar Aleph. Mishmar Aleph was stationed. Now again, who was part of Mishmar Aleph? You had Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. So Rabbi says, so now remember again, to divide up all the Kohanim and Leviim into 24 Mishmoros, that you could do. And all the respective Kohanim of that Mishmar, all the respective Leviim of that Mishmar would be in Yerushalayim. You can't divide up Klal Yisrael into 24 groups, or I should say differently. Even if you divided up Klal Yisrael into 24 groups, you could not get that whole contingent of Yisraelim into Yerushalayim. So what did they do with the Yisraelim? So Rashi says, Ulevad elu hadarim b'Yerushalayim hayu ma'amados b'chol ir sheYisrael nechleku lechav dalad ma'amados keneged arba ve'esim mishmoros. So I will say, Rashi says something amazing. Rashi says the Yisraelim who lived in Yerushalayim were present with the Mishmar in the Beis HaMikdash, the place where they could go to. The rest of the Yisraelim who did not live in Yerushalayim, they gathered in their local towns. Shavuot says, so this is incredible, because according to Rashi, and this is where there becomes a little bit machlok, according to Rashi, in the Beis HaMikdash, for every Mishmar, there were Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim who are actually present in the Mikdash. How do you choose which Yisraelim are present in the Mikdash and which Yisraelim gather in their local towns? It's very simple, matter of residency. If you lived in Yerushalayim, if you were Zocha to live in Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, you were present in the Mikdash together with the Mishmar. If you did not live in Yerushalayim, but were still privileged to live in Eretz Yisrael, you gather in your local towns, as we will describe. Now I will say, this is Rashi's Pshat. I will just point out, other opinions hold that Yisraelim never really gathered in the Mikdash. Only Kohanim and Leviim gathered in the Mikdash. Yisraelim only gathered in the outlying towns. But again, we're going to go with Rashi. So the Gemara says, so what happens? Back to the Mishnah. V'yisar also Mishmar. So we'll say, so therefore again, you have 24 Mishmoros. Each Mishmar made up of Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim who live in Yerushalayim gather in the Mikdash. And what do the rest of the Yisraelim do? Says, Mishnah says, also Mishmar, Miskansin la'areim. They gather in their local cities. So the Yisraelim, who are part of that Mishmar, gather in their local cities. V'korin b'maaseh bereishis. And they will say, what do they do as part of the Mishnah? So we're going to see, they fast and they daven, but the Torah reading that they engage in is Maaseh Bereishis, is the Genesis narrative. Now, look at Rashi for just a moment. V'ashar hayu miskansin la'areim, u'spalolin al karban achehem, sheyiskablu beratzon, u'misanin u'motzian sefer Torah b'yom Taanis. So both say, the Israelim who are not in Yerushalayim gathered in their local cities, and what would they do? They would fast and they would daven. Now, what are they davening for? What are they fasting for? They're fasting and davening that their karbanos should be readily accepted. That their karbanos. So we'll say, see, first of all, can you just imagine for a moment what you pretty much have is all of Klal Yisrael united in one avoda. Everyone's united in one avoda. That which is really something amazing. So you have Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, and Yerushalayim. They're present for the carbon tamid. You have the Yisraelim part of that Mishmar gathered in their respective cities. And I also remember again, there's a large swath of the population. Divide up all the Yisraelim into 24 shifts. That's a lot of Yisraelim. They're gathered in their local cities. They're fasting and they're davening. And they're davening that the carbon should be accepted. Okay, so the Gemara Mishnah goes on. So we'll say, so they read the Genesis narrative. Now we'll say, so if you are a Yisrael, well, the truth is, we'll see, Anshe Ma'amad means everyone in the Ma'amad, but we'll discuss, okay, but right now I'll read as everyone in the Ma'amad would fast 4 days. Remember again, your Mishmar was 1 week. The people of the Ma'amad would fast 4 days out of the week. Miyom Beis ad Yom Chamishi. They would fast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. V'lo hayu misanin erev Shabbos, they wouldn't fast on Friday. Maybe they covered Shabbos, because they both say it's not covered Shabbos to go into Shabbos fasting. V'lo be'echad b'Shabbos, and interesting, if they wouldn't fast on Sunday, kedei shelo yetzu mimenucha v'oneg liyagia v'Taanis v'yamusu. Because sometimes the contrast of like a very physically enjoyable Shabbos going into a fast day could be a bit too much on the system. It could be a shock to the system, and literally the Mishnah says they could die. Whether that's a bit hyperbolic or just saying we do want people to be healthy, so they wouldn't fast on Friday and they wouldn't fast on Sunday. Fine. So now the Mishnah is going to go through the Torah reading of these days. B'yom harishon Bereshis, so both on the first day of the Ma'amad, they read Bereshis, Vayhirakia. So from the Bereshis up until Vayhirakia. So both say the Mishnah is just going to talk about how they divided up the Genesis narrative. B'sheni on the second day, Yehirakia v'yikavu hamayim. There should be a sky until let the waters be gathered. B'shlishi on the third day, Yikavu hamayim v'hima oros. On the third day, on Tuesday, let the waters be gathered until the luminaries. B'revi'i on the fourth day, Wednesday, Yehima oros v'yishutzu hamayim, luminaries until the water creatures. B'chamishi, yishutzu hamayim v'sosia aretz. Fifth day, yishutzu hamayim, water creatures, let the land sprout forth its the animals. B'shishi, v'atotzea aretz, land brings forth animals. Ad vaychulu hashamayim. Until Shabbos, says the Mishnah, Parsha Gedola Korin Osa Bishnayim, a large parsha. Now what they would literally do is they would read this as a Kriyas HaTorah. So remember again, we'll discuss a Kriyas HaTorah has no less than 3 olim, right? Than 3 aliyos. We'll actually see this in Maseches Megillah. Has no less than 3 aliyos. So if it was a large parsha, meaning again 6 psukim or more, you would divide it up amongst 2 people. Vaktana, if it was a small parsha, biyachid. Ultimately, again, you would divide it up. You wouldn't divide it up. You would just assign it to 1 ola. B'shachris b'musaf. So we'll say this is how they did it by shachris and by musaf. So interestingly enough, it sounds like from the Mishnah that halacha l'maisa they performed this Torah reading both by shachris and by musaf. B'mincha, however, by mincha, they would once again read the Genesis narrative, the Maaseh Bereshis, but nichnasin v'korin alpian kikorin eshma. By mincha, when they would reread it, they wouldn't take out a Torah, but rather again, they would read the same reading, but they would read it bal peh. They would read it bal peh. Erev Shabbos b'mincha, we'll say Erev Shabbos b'mincha, we'll say just, again, I want to point out over here, what we're describing over here are the ma'amados, not the mishmar. Again, remember the word, the ma'amad is part of the mishmar. But when we speak about the mishmar, we're specifically referring to the group that is gathered in the Beis HaMikdash. Right now the Mishnah is talking about what the ma'amados did. Which, remember again, who is the ma'amad? Just so we're clear on it. Who is the ma'amad? Who is the ma'amad? The group of Yisraelim who are part of that mishmar, according to Rashi. These are the Jews who do not live in Yerushalayim, so therefore they're gathering in their local towns, doing their part to be the representatives. Now let's remember again, their role is that they're the representatives of Am Yisrael for the carbon tzibur, for the carbon tamid. But their role is they're davening that the carbon should be accepted. So the Mishnah is going through what they did when they gathered. So they gathered Shachris, Musaf, they read Kriyas HaTorah. Mincha, they would read the same thing again, but this time without a scroll. They would just read it bal peh. Erev Shabbos b'mincha, lo hayu nichnasim neikar Shabbos. So we'll say there was no official ma'amad gathering by Erev Shabbos by mincha, because again, Erev Shabbos by mincha, time to get ready for Shabbos. Kol Yom. So we'll say now the Mishnah is going to go through just the various details, or I should say the various things that can impact a ma'amad. So Kol Yom sheyesh bo halal. Any dirabosai which we recite halal, ein ma'amad b'shachris. So remember again, if there's halal, then we don't have a ma'amad by shachris. Now, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi now is in the wide lines, 5 lines in. Kol yom sheish v'hala ein bo ma'amad b'shachris. Osan shay b'Yerushalayim lo hayu mispalelin al karban acheihem sheyesh bo halal lefi she'ein lahen pnai la'asos ma'amadam shekorin es halal or mipnei ha'halal hayu dochin es ha'ma'amad. So we'll say, this is very interesting. So Rashi understands that this is a reference over here to the Jews. Rashi for some reason comments that it's the Jews in Yerushalayim. The Marsha, others comment like they're not sure why Rashi says it's the Jews of Yerushalayim, but what he says is that essentially we'll go with the Jews of the Ma'amad if there was Hallel, they would not go ahead and daven the normal ma'amod tefilos. Why? Because there's Hallel. And since there's Hallel, there's not enough time to go ahead and daven the tefilos for the ma'amad, and therefore again Hallel would set aside the ma'amados. So I will say there's a much more pashut pshat also, which is the ma'amados have an element of there's an element of like a Taanis sibur associated with them, right? Because remember again, they are fasting, and the fast is not a mournful fast, it's not a difficult fast, but it's a supplicatory fast. So on a pashut level, on a day that there's Hallel is docha the ma'amados. Hallel is docha the ma'amados by shachris. Karban Musaf, any day that there's Karban Musaf, ein b'ne'ilah. Ultimately, again, there is no ma'amad by ne'ilah. Now take a look at Rashi. Rashi is Karban Musaf. Yom sheyish bo Karban Musaf b'Yerushalayim, ein ma'amad b'ne'ilah b'Yerushalayim, v'chol shekin b'mincha smucha l'musaf. So Rashi in the sense over here like this: any day there's a Karban Musaf, so there's no ma'amad by ne'ilah. Remember again, the Mishnah is presupposing that every single time they gather, there's going to be this ma'amad service. Just the difference is by Shachris and Musaf, they're taking out a Sefer Torah. By every other tefillah, they're just reading the particular Genesis narrative, Baal Peh. So now the Gemara says, any day that there's a Karban Musaf, because remember again, not every day that you have Halal is there a Karban Musaf, as you just saw in Chanukah, right? So again, but any day which is a Karban Musaf, there's no Ma'amad even by Ne'ilah. Look at Rashi again. Yom sheyesh bo Karban Musaf b'Yerushalayim, ein Ma'amad b'Ne'ilah b'Yerushalayim, v'chol shekin b'mincha hasmucha l'musaf. Lefisha yutrudin b'musaf, sheyesh bo lahakriv behemos yoser mitamid shu echad. Ein locha musaf lo shtei behemos v'lo hayolem pinai klal shakohanim shal ma'amad shudin b'musaf v'yisol shabayin hayu shudin lachtov eitzim v'lishov mayim v'doch afilu ma'amad din'ilah. So we'll say it's very interesting. So Rashi understands that when the Mishnah says any day there's a Karban Musaf, there's no ma'amad by ne'ilah and certainly not by mincha, is referring to the Yisraelim in Yerushalayim. This is fascinating. Why? Because when there was a Karban Musaf, there's so much that has to get done. There's a lot of karbanos that have to be offered. How does that impact Yisraelim? Rabbi said, this is incredible. Who would chop the extra wood and draw the extra water? Who would do that? Yisraelim. Rabbi said, I have to tell you something. This Rashi was mamish mechayim mesim for me. Because I'll tell you just on a personal level, it is one of the things I yearn for most in this world is to be a Kohen. But okay, not to be. Right? Also, I've gone to so many levayas, I would go broke at the number of karbanos I would have to bring when the Beis HaMikdash would come. But in any event, it's my dream. Because again, there's a certain element of pain that's associated with the fact that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. And if you're like me, a Yisrael, you're going to be like a spectator looking in. It's not fair. It's not fair, right? It's mamish, like, if you think that's painful. The Kohanim, the Levim, they're going to be engaged. They're doing the avoda, the big day kahuna opportunity, of course, and Yisraelim are on the inside looking out. But look at Rashi says, it's not true. There's a role for us as well. We get to chop wood and draw water. I'll probably find the guy to chop the wood, but the drawing the water, right? The drawing the water. Let's say, so you see that even Yisraelim are afforded some type of privilege. So when each of us Yisraelim are going to be assigned to a particular ma'amad, and during that ma'amad, if there is a Karban Musaf, even a Yisrael has the opportunity to do something. Good. Back to the Mishnah. Right, the Mishnah, Karban Eitzim. They both say, what about a day when Karban Eitzim are brought? There's so much incredible Gemara over here. Karban Eitzim, we'll say we're going to get into this. Rashi says over here, we're not going to go through it now. We'll go through it a little bit later on in the Mishnah. We'll say Karban Eitzim very quickly was as follows. When the Jews came back with Ezra for the Spayis Sheni, there was, interestingly enough, a shortage of wood. There was a shortage of wood. You can't run a Beis HaMikdash without wood. It's the fuel, right? Wood is everything. Because everything in a Beis HaMikdash requires a fire. Ketoros requires a fire. Carbon tam, right? Mizbeach achitzon requires an eish tamid. Outer altar requires a constantly burning fire. We're going to see there are 9 families who stepped up and pledged wood. On the day in which they pledged wood, they bring a specific, what's called a Karban Eitzim, a wood offering. It's not actually a carbon of wood. It's a shlumim that they would bring, celebrating the day of their donation. We'll say, we'll talk about that more in just a moment. And a day with this carbon eitzim, so the Gemara says, Ein b'mincha div Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say, day with this carbon eitzim, ultimately again, there is no ma'amod by mincha. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Amar lo ben Azai. Ben Azai, we'll say, happens to be Rabbi Akiva's Talmud, says to him, Kachaya Rabbi Yoshua Shoni. Rabbi Yoshua had a little bit different version. He held, carbon musaf, in b'mincha. Any day when we offer a carbon musaf, there is no ma'amod by mincha. Carbon eitzim ein b'ne'ilah. Whenever we offer up a carbon eitzim, there's no ma'amad by ne'ilah, but there would be a ma'amad by mincha, musaf, shachris. We'll see what the root of that machlokes is in the Gemara. Chazar Rabbi Akiva lihios shone keben Azai. Rabbi Akiva ultimately changed his mind and he aligned his shita with that of Ben Azai. Beautiful. So we'll say, let's talk. So we'll say that's the ma'amados. That's the ma'amados. We'll say, it is a privilege to learn a Mishnah like this because Baruch Hashem, if we can't be in Eretz Yisrael and we can't go ahead and yet have a Beis Hamikdash, these Gemaras, these are Eretz Yisrael Gemaras. This is Mamish Eretz Yisrael Gemara. So if we can't be there and we don't yet have a bias, there's at least a quasi experience of Eretz Yisrael, a quasi experience of the Beis Hamikdash when we're able to delve into these Gemaras. Zman Atzei Kohanim. Shabbos says, let's talk about this. It's just Mava'am. Tisha. Shabbos says, we just made reference before to the Karban Ha'etzim. So what is this Karban Ha'etzim? What are these wood offerings? So the Gemara says, Tisha. There were 9 dates. When Jewish families pledged wood to the Beis Hamikdash. Shabbos says, so what does it mean to pledge wood? What it means to pledge wood is, quite literally, you agree to supply the Beis Hamikdash with the necessary amount of wood. I will say, so the day in which you pledged became Yom Tov, which I will say is such an incredible fundraising yesod. If you think about it, I will say, the day in which you give to something in community is a Yom Tov. The day in which you have an opportunity to partner, whatever it is that you're partnering, a school, a shul, whatever it might be, the day in which you see people often feel like, giving, right? But the day in which you give is the day in which you contribute to the community, the day in which you help build communal infrastructure, ultimately is a Yom Tov. It's mamish a Yom Tov. You don't even have to say tachnun. That might be an incredible incentive for giving. Right? I think giving would go up on Mondays and Thursdays significantly. Right? So I'll say, so listen to this. So they would go ahead and there were 9 families who pledged. Here we go. We'll say, we actually have historical record as to who the families were and what days they pledged. Which I will say is something, think about this. Just before we start, I just want to point out how incredible this is. We're going to see, we know which families pledged which days. Why is this unique? Because I will say, there is so much about how the Beis Hamikdash operated and what happened that is shrouded in so much machlokas. Yet, what do we remember? Who gave? Because we'll say, at the end of the day, the willingness to step up and give, the willingness to step up and donate, the willingness to go ahead and not just sit on the sideline, but literally be the financier, if that's the right financier, right, of Kiddusha, of a Mikdash, of community. I will say, those are the builders. And those are the people whose names are forever etched in history. That is never forgotten. If you step up and you give and you help build, that is recorded in the Mishnah Maseches Taanis, Daf Chaf Vav Amud Aleph forever. Because those who choose to step up and help build, ultimately again have a chelik in the continuity of Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara goes weiter. So listen to this. Here we go. Be'echad ben Nisan, b'nei Arach ben Yehuda. The first of Nisan, the sons of Arach ben Yehuda gave. Be'esrim b'Tammuz, the 20th of Tammuz, b'nei David ben Yehuda. Now both say again, these are, Rashi points out over here, b'nei David is literally memishpachas David HaMelech. These are literally the family members of David HaMelech. B'chamisha b'av, on the 5th of Av, b'nei Parush ben Yehuda. Okay, these are just all the family names. B'shiva bo, on the 7th of Av, b'nei Yonadav ben Rachav. Yonadav, the sons of Yonadav ben Rachav. B'asara bo, on the 10th of Av, b'nei Sana ben Binyamin. Good. B'chamisha sabo, on the 15th of Av, b'nei Zesu ben Yehuda. Now, here's what's interesting. Something else happened on the 15th of Av, which was v'imaim kohanim uleviim v'chol mi sheta b'shvato. Now, listen to this. There were some people who knew that their family had pledged to Karban Eitzim, but they lost historical record. They lost historical record. So they did not know the family names who pledged or when those family names who pledged. So, if you knew that your family pledged carbon ha'etzim, but you did not know when, you joined in with the family of Zesu ben Yehuda on Tu B'Av, on the 15th of Av. So 15th of Av was like the catch-all day. If you knew that your family participated, but you just didn't have accurate historical record as to when, that's the day you would join in. U'bnei gon v'eli, u'bnei kotze ktzios. We'll discuss this. Literally, the sons of gon ve'eli rabosei are pestle, like a mortar and pestle, right? Pestle thieves. Okay, we'll discuss who those people are. The sons of the pestle stealers, u'bnei kotze ktzios, and the sons of the fig cutters. We'll discuss who those people are. Be'esrimbo. They brought their carbon ha'etzim on the 20th of Av. Bnei Pachas Moav ben Yehuda, be'esrim be'elu. The sons of Pachas Moav, the sons of Yehuda, they brought, by the way, when it says ben Yehuda, that literally means from the shevet of Yehuda. Be'esrim be'elu, they brought on the 20th of Elu. Bnei Adin ben Yehuda, be'echa b'teves. The sons of Adin ben Yehuda, they brought on the 1st of Teves. B'nei Parush, Be'echa b'Teves, on the 1st of Teves, Shavune b'nei Parush nir. And I will say again, the cycle repeated itself on the 1st of Teves. Ultimately, again, the sons of Parush brought a second carbon ha'etzim. So I'll say, that is the schedule for the carbon ha'etzim. The 9 times carbon ha'etzim were brought. So we'll say, it's actually very interesting. Jumping back now to the Ma'amados. Get ready for this. A beautiful confluence of events here. Be'echa b'Teves, lo hayu b'm ma'amad. Both say there was one day in which no ma'amad took place. When was that? Rosh Chodesh Teves. Why? Shahayu bo halel, the carbon musaf, the carbon ha'etzim. So I will say, this is absolutely incredible, because what happened on Rosh Chodesh Teves, so I will say, isn't this incredible? They are reading this Gemara just a few days into Teves. Remember again, what's Rosh Chodesh Teves? It's Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and it was also the date of carbon ha'etzim. So you have everything. You have halal, you have carbon musaf, and you have carbon ha'etzim. It's the only day throughout the year when you have all three of those things converging on one date. So because you had all of that, therefore what? Lo haya bo ma'amad klal. Lo haya ma'amad. There was no ma'amad. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Shrosh Chodesh v'Chanukah. They both say, isn't it such a privilege to read a Chanukah Gemara 2 days after Chanukah? To be mamshich the ar. Just to continue the light a little bit. So incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, fine, good. Chamisha, we'll say, fine. That's the end of Chelik Aleph of the Mishnah, right? Chelik Aleph is done. So Chelik Aleph was all about the Mishmoros and the Ma'amados. Again, I will point out, remember, we did start with Duchening. We're going to loop back to Duchening because the Mishnah began with a statement that 3 times throughout the year we Duchen 4 times a day. We're going to go back to the Gemara, but remember, the bulk of Chelik Aleph of the Mishnah was all about the Ma'amados and the Mishnah. So we'll say now we come to a very gripping part of the Gemara. Chamisha, from the Mishnah, sorry. Check 2 lines off at the bottom, Chavav Amud Aleph. Chamisha Devarim Iros Avasinim B'Shiva Asar B'Tammuz V'Chamisha B'Tisha B'Av. We'll say a heartbreaking Mishnah. There are 5 things that happened to our forefathers on the 17th of Tammuz, and 5 things that happened on Tisha B'Av. What are they? B'Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, on the 17th of Tammuz, Nishtabru Haluchos. So we'll say it was on the 17th of Tammuz that Moshe Rabbeinu descended from Har Sinai and saw that we built the golden calf. Upon seeing that we built the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu made a decision to go ahead and break the luchos, to break the first set of tablets. That happened on the 17th of Tammuz. Ubatal hatamid, and the tamid stopped being offered. Rashi says, Ubatal hatamid, lefisha gazra hamalchus gzeira milahakriv od. Shabbos saying, the Maharsha points out, there's some historical machlokes as to what era is this? What era is this? Is this Bayis Rishon? Is this Bayis Sheni? Is this the destruction of Bayis Sheni? Is this during the times, actually we'll say, the Maharsha points out that it's quite possible this was actually during the times of the Hashmonaim. There was some infighting during the times of the Hashmonaim, brother laying siege against the brother. So it's possible that again, it happened not during the destruction, not during the Churban, but during internal strife. In any event, 17th of Tammuz represented a day in which the carbon tamid stopped. It stopped. Now, we'll say, what we'll see is it resumed afterwards. But on the 17th of Tammuz, there's a trauma because that which is supposed to be continuous ceased. We'll say, what an incredible yesod. right? The whole success of the Jew lies in continuity, lies in the ability as Karbani Lachmi Liishai, the carbon tamid day after day after day. And if a Jew misses carbon tamid, the Beis Hamikdash misses carbon tamid, that's traumatic. That's traumatic. So the Mishnah says, ultimately on the 17th of Tammuz, the tamid ceased. V'hovka'ir, the walls of the city of Yerushalayim were breached. V'saraf Afustamas as Torah. Rabbi said Afustamas, who was a Greek general, burnt the Torah. Rabbi said the Maharsha points out which Torah did he burn. So some say this was the Sefer Torah of Ezra. Remember again, there was an authoritative Sefer Torah kept inside of the Beis Hamikdash, to which all other Sefer Torah were checked. Because also remember again, in the Torah you have a number of things called the Kriya and Ksiv, where a word is written one way but read a different way. Written one way but read a different way. So there was this authoritative Sefer Torah that was kept in the Mikdash. Afustamos burnt, or the Maharsha says just stam. Not stam chashem, that it wasn't necessarily Ezra's Sefer Torah, but Afustamos made a public display of burning a Sefer Torah inside of the Beis Hamikdash. And he went ahead and he put up an idol inside of the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi points out, see, the Pashat way to read this Mishnah is this same Afustamos who burnt the Torah also put up an idol in the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi has a different gear. So Rashi says Shemidu Menashe, that in fact it wasn't it's not referring to an idol put up by Afustamos, but rather an idol put up by King Menashe. King Menashe was the son of Chizkiyahu, right? The son of Chizkiyahu. He reigned for 55 years. Unfortunately, again, for the first 33 of them was a terrible Rasha, and he put up an idol in the Beis Hamikdash. So machlokes, is it Afustamos' idol? Is it Menashe's idol? The truth is, it doesn't matter. What matters is that on the 17th of Tammuz, something spiritually traumatic took place with the putting up of an idol in the Beis HaMikdash. B'Tish B'Av, those are the 5 events that occurred on Shivasar B'Tammuz. B'Tish B'Av, what happened on Tisha B'Av? Nigzar alav osinu shlei kansu la'aretz. I will say, for number 1, Chet HaMeraglim. Right, the sin of the Meraglim happened on Tisha B'Av. I will say now what really happened on Tisha B'Av was the cries of Klal Yisrael are what happened on Tisha B'Av, our reaction. Remember again, we'll say, just to be clear, the Chet HaMeraglim, the damage of the Chet HaMeraglim wasn't just simply in the report of the spies. It was the fact that we accepted it, right? People say crazy stuff all of the time. The nation is not held accountable for the words of the individuals, Baruch Hashem, or otherwise we'd be in incredible trouble, right? The Chet HaMeraglim was that the Meraglim delivered this disastrous report, and we accepted it. We accepted it. That's why the Gemara is going to say, Atem bechisem bechia shalchinam. What we're held accountable by the Chet HaMeraglim is that we accepted the Lashon Hara of the Meraglim. We accepted the slanders, the negative words about Eretz Yisrael. So that happened. That happened on Tisha B'Av, and therefore Nigzar Lavasin Shlei Kansel Aretz. Kadosh Baruch Hu decreed that we will not enter into the land on Tisha B'Av. He decreed on Tisha B'Av that we will not enter into the land. That was the 40-year exile. The first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash were both destroyed on the 9th of Av. V'nilkida Beitar. The city of Beitar ultimately again was run over. Not run over is the wrong word. Was conquered, was overtaken. Rashi says Beitar Ir Gidola V'Hayu Yisrael Darin Bam Seches Gin. So we'll say, so remember again, we know the story of Beitar. The story of Beitar. Beitar was the last holdout in the revolt against the Romans. In the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the city of Beitar was the last bastion. It was the last fortress. When the city of Beitar fell, the Bar Kokhba rebellion was effectively squashed. It was done. And the Romans took out special fury against the residents of Beitar. Also remember again, we'll see in the Gemara, this is where they did not allow the Jews to bury their dead. They left the dead on the street for days. V'nocha da Beitar v'nechra sha'ir. And Abba said this is also where the Yerushalayim itself was plowed over. Specifically the Makom HaMikdash. After the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it wasn't just that the Mikdash was destroyed, but literally again the area of Harabayis was plowed over to remove almost any historical remembrance that a Beis HaMikdash stood there. Misha nichnas av mematin b'simcha. And therefore the Mishnah says, as a result of these terrible events which occurred on the 9th of Av, there is a general mourning that descends upon the entire month of Av. And therefore when the month of Av enters, mematin b'simcha, we decrease our displays of joy. We'll discuss exactly what that means. And I will say, interestingly enough now, the Mishnah transitions into the halachos concerning the 9 days. And I will say, it's going to be actually quite shocking because as we're going to see, the halacha, the stam halacha of the morning practices of the 9 days are dramatically different than what we observe today, at least Ashkenazim observe today. Sfaradim observe much more closer to the Mishnah. So here we go. Shabbos shechal Tisha B'av lios besocha. The week of Tisha B'av, Asr milasaper milachabes. You can't launder, you can't take a haircut. So we'll say, I want to point out to you, from the Mishnah perspective, from the Talmudic perspective, there are no morning practices that begin as of Rosh Chodesh Av. There's no 9 days. There's Shavua Shechalbo. All there is are morning practices the week of. The week of. And what can't you do the week of? You can't take a haircut. You can't launder your clothing. Listen to this. So we'll say this is actually pretty wild. However, if Tisha B'av falls out on Friday, which could happen before the calendar was set, if Tisha B'av were to fall out on Friday, you are permitted to get a haircut and launder your clothing on Thursday, which is wild, right? So you could get a haircut and launder your clothing on Thursday, l'kavod Shabbos, even though what? It's Erev Tisha B'av. Amazing. Erev Tisha B'av, so we'll say something again on Erev Tisha B'av, lo yochal adam shnei tavshin, a person should not eat two cooked foods. In other words, Erev Tisha B'av, your consumption should reflect the morning nature of the day. So don't eat two cooked foods, right? Furthermore, again, lo yochal basar v'lo yishteh yayin. You shouldn't eat meat, you shouldn't drink wine. Abba says, incredible. You see from the Mishnah, the prohibition of eating meat and drinking wine really only applies when, according to the Mishnah, only applies when? Erev Tisha B'av. Erev Tisha B'av, quite amazing. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, the truth is, we're not really going to get into too much what it is that you can't eat, you don't eat. Just here's what you should do. Erev Tisha B'av, you should change your normal eating habits. So in other words, don't have on Erev Tisha B'av like a regular Suda, like you would have each and every day. Rabbi Yehuda said that on Tisha B'av, you have to overturn your bed, which effectively means you have to sleep on the floor. The Chacham did not agree with this practice. And I will say, there are many who do have the practice to sleep on the floor on Tisha B'av, but again, it's not a halacha, it's not a requirement. So we'll say, now we're transitioning again. Incredible. So we'll say, by the way, isn't this incredible? We just went from Tisha B'av, 5 terrible events that happened on Tisha B'av, and what's the next line? There are no greater Yomim Tovim, no greater joyous days for Klal Yisrael than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. I will say, isn't this how the Jew lives? Right? The Jew is able to transition from tsar to simcha, from simcha to tsar. We are constantly living in this dialectic, and we have mastered the ability to mourn and then to be joyous in the next moment, and then to be joyous and then to mourn for that which has been lost. The heart of the Jew has mastered this ability to transition between these emotional states. Because Rabbi say, isn't this life? Life is never a continuous emotional experience, right? This is what I often say this. When people come to be Menachem Mavel, right? So people say to you, "Oh, you should only have simchas. You should only have simchas." So it's interesting. Both the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and Rabbi Soloveitchik both said the same idea. They said it's such a naive thought. What do you mean you should only have simchas? Nobody has only simchas, right? It's a bracha levatala to tell someone they should only have simchas. It's not real. It's It's cosmetic. It's not true. No one has only simchas. Right? The bracha you give in Avos, Hashem should give you strength because life is simchas and tsaras and simchas, and the Jew is perpetually prepared to deal with those emotional peaks and valleys. That's how in a Mishnah you could go from Tisha B'av to Yomim Tovim in one line. That's what life is all about, the ability to transition seamlessly between different emotional states. So let's listen to this. The Gemara says the greatest Yomim Tovim were the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. That's interesting. So we'll discuss this in the Gemara. The Mishnah doesn't explain this at all. Right? Doesn't explain this at all. Doesn't tell us what is special about the 15th of Av. We're going to see in the Gemara. Again, Yom Kippur, the Gemara presupposes that we know Yom Kippur is a day of Simcha. Okay? We'll see why exactly that is. Well, we'll say what happened on Tu B'Av. This is why. Listen to this. Shebahen Benos Yisrael Yotzos Bikli Lavan She'ulim. So listen to this. What would happen on the 15th of Av? The Jewish girls would go out. They would go out and they would borrow white clothing from each other. Why would they borrow clothing from each other? Shalavayish es misha inlo. In order not to embarrass anyone who didn't have. So we'll say, first of all, just how beautiful this is. Right? So on the 15th of Av, the girls would go out and they would exchange clothing with each other. Which will say, in order not to embarrass someone, it's so important that we never utilize our gashmias in a way that makes someone feel inferior. Baruch Hashem, we should all be gebenched with incredible bracha and incredible parnas and incredible gashmias. And we're supposed to enjoy our gashmias. We're not an ascetic religion. But we always just have to be so careful that how we use the things that we have from our Kadosh Baruch Hu never makes someone else feel less important or somehow inferior. Not that you can't control how someone else feels, but you can control, right, how you broadcast what it is that you have. So you see over here, the richest girls, the poorest girls, everybody borrowed clothing from one another. So no one should be embarrassed. So first of all, also you had to immerse all of the utensils, right? Because remember again, let's say somebody had borrowed a beged that was tamei. So in order not to go ahead and embarrass anyone, this one's tamei, this one's tamer, everything was immersed. And what I was supposed to say, this is wild. The girls would go out to dance in the vineyards. Supposed to say this was a shidduch event. This was a shidduch event. So listen to this. The girls would go out and they would go ahead and they would try to attract potential husbands, which I will say, by the way, is whatever. Okay, a different discussion about. We'll say how. I'll just mention it this way, that Oh no, I'm not going to mention it. Okay, let's go right there. Almost, you have to finish. What would the girls say? Bachar sana einecha urei ma'ata bor lecha. The girls would say to young men, be very careful. The criteria that you use to go ahead and choose a wife. Al titain einecha benoi. Don't choose a wife just based on beauty. Tain einecha b'mishpacha. Rather, look at yichus. Look at mishpacha. And I will say, by the way, yichus doesn't have to mean that the girl's father is some great Rav and her grandfather was a tzaddik and this one was a Talmud Chacham. I will say, what it means is sometimes if you base your marriage choices based on externalities, the interesting part about externalities is they come and go, right? What is beautiful today may not be as beautiful tomorrow. So the girls were saying, make your marriage choices based on things that endure. You see, you could tell a lot about a person from the mishpacha they come from. Now I will say, that goes both ways, and I want to be very clear. You don't choose which family you're born into. So very often, again, a person is very different from the mishpacha. Bein l'tov, bein l'ra. But the girls were saying, don't just go in and look for beauty, but rather, again, look from where a girl comes from. Look at who her parents are. Look at who the mishpacha is. Is it a family that is steeped in Torah, steeped in mitzvah, steeped in Yiddishkeit? Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi. Because beauty is vain, right? Beauty is vain, or beauty is false, and beauty is vain. So, Isha Yiras Hashem Hitis Halal, a woman who fears HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that should be praised. Now, we'll see what's interesting about this is that it's nothing to do with mishpacha, right? That has to do with the quality of the individual. So again, the Gemara will explain what exactly this whole conversation was. V'omer, Tinula mi priyadeh, v'yelua b'sharim ma'asel. And furthermore, the pasuk says, give her of the fruit of her hand, and her deeds will praise her in the gates. V'cheinu omer, tsena ure'ena b'nos Tzion b'melech Shlomo, ba'atara she'itra la'ima b'yom chasuna so, u'b'yom simchas libo. Furthermore, the pasuk says, go out and see the daughters of Tzion, about King Solomon, with the crown that his mother made for him on the day of his wedding, and on the day of the joy of his heart. The Gemara says, what does this refer to? B'yom chasuna so, what's the day of his wedding? Zem matan Torah. This refers to the day that we receive Torah. Again, we'll discuss. Rashi says over here, Matan Torah means Yom Kippurim. Very interesting. Rashi, in the sense, the day that you receive the Torah is not a reference to Shavuos, but rather it's a reference to Yom Kippur, because on Yom Kippur we receive the second set of Luchos. Ubiyom Simchas Libo, the day of the joy of your heart. Zeh Binyan Beis HaMikdash. This refers to, we'll say, so incredible. What's the day of the joy of our heart? Zeh Binyan Beis HaMikdash. The day when our hearts will truly be joyful. That's the day when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, Sheyibana b'mehera b'yameinu. So I must say, we will explain this whole Tu B'Av piece of the Mishnah was incredibly unclear, right? What exactly is happening on Tu B'Av? Why are the girls going out to go ahead and dance in the vineyards? Why is this a day of Shidduchim? And what exactly are they saying to the boys? Emir Hashem to be clarified in the Gemara. So we'll say, now let's start the Gemara. Bishlosha frakim, bishlosha bishana kanosas kara. So remember again, how do we start the Mishnah? This is so incredible. How do we start the Mishnah? We started the Mishnah by saying that 3 times throughout the year, we duchen 4 times during the day. Remember again, what were the 4 times during the day? Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah. What are the 3 times during the year? 3 times during the year? Yom Kippur, Ma'amados, Tanios. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Tanios or Ma'amados, Mi'ika Musaf? Both say that doesn't make sense. On a Taanis, on a fasting, on a Maimad, you have Shachris, Mincha, Ne'ilah, but you don't have Musaf. So what does this mean? To which the Gemara says, you're right. Here's how I have to read the Mishnah. Bishlosha prakim, kohanim nosin es kapeim kozman shemispalalim. There are 3 times throughout the year where the kohanim will duchen by every single tefillah. They'll duchen by every single tefillah. V'yesh mehen arba'im pamim bayom. And some of those times, that will mean that we'll duchen up to what? 4 times throughout that day. Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, Une'ilas, Hasha'arim. So we'll say, Ve'eluhen, what are the 3 times a year? Ve'eluhen, Shlosha Prakim, Tanios, Uma'amal, Yom Kippur. So we'll say, therefore, what the Mishnah means is like this. Gemara says, how does have to read the Mishnah? There are 3 times throughout the year when we will duchen during every tefillah. And during some of those times, that'll mean you'll duchen 3 times. And sometimes it'll mean that what? You'll duchen 4 times. For example, when will you duchen 4 times? When will you duchen 4 times? In this list, Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur has Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, and Ne'ilah. So really what the Mishnah is teaching us is that there are 3 times throughout the year where you will duchen by every single tefillah, Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, and Ne'ilah. Amra Nachman, Amra Barabua, Sudiv Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi says, Rabbi Meir holds that Allah Lamaisa on these days, Ta'anios, Ma'amados, Yom Kippur, you will duchen every single tefillah. Avachachamim the Chum say no. Shachris umusaf yeshva nesiyas kapayim mincha uneila eiba nesiyas kapayim. So also we're going to get into a fascinating machlokes now. We're going to get into now the Chum hold that generally you only duchen during what we'll call the morning services, Shachris and Musaf, but you never duchen during mincha and neila. Man Chacham will say, who is the opinion of the Chachamim? So Rabbi Yehuda, this Rabbi Yehuda, Disanya, Shachris, Musaf, Mincho, Ne'ilah, Kulan, Yish, Bahem, Nesiyas, Kam, Rabbi Meir. So what's Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that Allah Lamaisa, you duchen by all tefilos. You duchen by all tefilos, Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shachris and Musaf Yeshua Nesiyas Kapayim, Mincha uneila imbam Nesiyas Kapayim. Rabbi Yehuda holds, Shachris and Musaf, you can duchen. Mincha Ne'ilah, you never duchen. Rabbi Yossi has a hybrid position. He holds, Ne'ilah Yeshua Nesiyas Kapayim, Mincha imbam Nesiyas Kapayim. Rabbi Yossi says that Ne'ilah, we do duchen, Mincha, we don't duchen. So we'll say, a 3-way machlokes. Rabbi Meir holds, we could duchen every tefillah. Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, Ne'ilah. Rabbi Yehuda, Shachris and Musaf only, never Mincha, Ne'ilah. Rabbi Yossi, Shachris, Musaf, no Mincha, but yes, Ne'ilah. So we'll say, the Gemara says, B'mai kamiflagi. What are they arguing about? So we'll say, here we go. So Rabbi Meir Savar, Kol Yoma Taima Mai Lo Parsi Kohani Adayu B'mincha Mishum Shichrus Ha'idna Leka Shichrus. So we'll say, listen to this. So we'll say, here's the problem. Rabbi Yossi is going. Actually, we'll say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stop over here for today. We'll stop. We'll pick up with this. We'll say, by the way, don't worry. We've got this all under control because again, the last daf of Maseches Taanis is only in Amud Aleph. So we'll say, so we'll stop over here for today. We're going to get into this machlokes. And we'll say, I want to tell you this is going to be a riveting machlokes. Because what we're also going to address is another very important issue. First of all, when we duchen, how we duchen, we're also going to address in Hashem, and tomorrow's shir is why we don't duchen during the week outside of Eretz Yisrael. Right? One of the highlights of being in Eretz Yisrael is Birchas Kohanim every single morning, but not the afternoon, every single morning. Again, we'll discuss in halacha why we don't duchen outside of Eretz Yisrael. Again, it's going to tie into the sugya. We'll stop over for today, continue tomorrow. Shkayach, everyone.
Thank you. I got a copy from the sauce.
Baruch Hashem. Should never need it again.